Hi everyone, my name's Cece. Welcome to my channel. For today's video, I am doing a series review and discussion of An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. If you've never heard of this series, it is a young adult fantasy set in a Roman-inspired society, and in the first book, we follow two perspectives. One is Leia. Sorry if I mispronounce the characters' names. I'm just gonna pronounce them how I did in my head. Okay, so you follow Leia, who is a part of the oppressed group in this society, and they are called scholars. At the beginning of the book, her brother is arrested for treason. She decides to join the resistance and help them in exchange for getting her brother out of prison. The way she helps is by going undercover as a slave in this warrior school called Blackcliff. And that is where we meet our second protagonist in this series, Elias. And he is a student at this soldier academy and has been there since he was a small child, and he hates the Empire and wants nothing to do with it. He thinks they are horrendous and that they treat children horribly. So he is making plans to escape Blackcliff. Things don't go as planned when he is forced to participate in a trial that includes the top students at this academy compete to see who will be the next emperor. And the story goes from there. Overall, I would give this entire series 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very good, and I knew that it was going to be good because this series definitely gets a lot of hype on the internet, and I think it's deserved hype. I think the series was very well done. As for my ratings for each book, I would give the first one, An Ember in the Ashes, 4 stars. The second one, A Torch Against the Night, also 4 stars. The third one, A Reaper at the Gates, I would give 3 stars. And then the last one, A Sky Beyond the Storm, I give also 4 stars. So overall, a 4-star series. The reason I'm not giving it 5 stars, mainly because this series, after having read it, isn't in like my top favorite series of all time. I think about them constantly and I love everything about them type situation. Even if I don't love everything about a series and I have problems with it, like if I love it enough, I will still consider it a favorite of all time and love it in spite of its flaws. But I feel like this series has a few flaws and it still isn't a favorite, so 4 stars. One of my biggest problems with this series were the just the romance in general did not vibe with. Some of the romantic pairings were not believable at all, and I felt no chemistry between some of the characters. By the end of it, there were some romantic pairings that I had been rooting for in the beginning that by the end of the series I just kind of didn't really care about anymore, which was a little disappointing, and I found myself like skimming over those parts in the story because I cared a lot more about the plot than the romance. Another thing that brings the rating down for me is I just felt like the world building was off. I don't know, and I feel like that could also just be me. I could have missed certain things, but just in every book, I just felt like something was off, something was missing, and I was confused. But again, that could just be me, I don't know, not paying attention, I guess. Especially when it came to the magical elements in the story. I felt like I had a lot of questions and some of the answers were just, I don't know, very simple or kind of out of nowhere, and there wasn't really an explanation to the magic really worked, I guess. Another thing that I did really enjoy throughout this series were the characters and the character arcs. I think that those were done very well for our 3 main characters. In the first book you only get 2 perspectives, but throughout the rest of the series you get 3 perspectives, and I really enjoyed all 3 character arcs. I think they flowed very nicely and they made a lot of sense. It all just worked and made sense for me. So I really enjoyed that. At the beginning of the series, Elias was my favorite character. I loved him. I thought he was great. He reminded me a lot of Percy Jackson. Again, that could just be me. but I really loved him for that, and his loyalty to his friends, and just like that he just wanted to live a good life, and I really felt for him. His character is a little funky in the third book, and it makes sense, but I wasn't really vibing with it, and I didn't know where it was going. However, by the time I got to the end of the fourth book, or the end of the series, I totally understood what was going on, why his character went through the things that he went through. I don't know, I felt like the third book did kind of take me out of the story a little bit because so many things were different, and a lot of the things that I loved from the first book just weren't there anymore, and that was just a little sad to me. That is another reason why I am rating the series a little lower, is because the third book just it just didn't grip me enough. I didn't know where things were going. By the end of it, I didn't dislike what had happened with Elias's character or just like certain plot points in general. They weren't my favorite. They just weren't my favorite. I don't dislike them, but I also don't love them. I think that's it for non-spoilers. Now I'm gonna get into a spoiler section of the discussion, and so if you haven't read the series, I would suggest you stop watching, but I do highly recommend this series to anybody who loves young adult fantasy. I think it's a solid one. Strong points throughout the series are the characters, and I would say the action and like political maneuverings, and the villains. I really liked the antagonists throughout this series. I thought they were very fleshed out and that they had a lot of substance to them. Highly recommend this series if you're a fan of young adult fantasy, or if you want to get into young adult fantasy, this could be a fun one to start with. Now, if you haven't read all of the books, please leave. So let's talk about the ships in this book, in this series. Leia and Elias, yes, I shipped them from the beginning. I wanted them to be together. They did end up together, but it was so rocky getting there. Okay, Leia and Kenan, there was never chemistry there. I'm sorry. I didn't think there was anything to that relationship at all. I had no idea why they were in love when I was reading it. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. How is she in love with Kenan when she has spent so much more time with Elias? They were building up their relationship too at the same time that Leia was like, yeah, I'm in love with Kenan. And it wasn't adding up at all. We get to the second book. Leia and Elias, they're on their way to break Darren out of prison, and then Kenan shows up like out of nowhere, and then they're just like together. I didn't like it at all. And then Elias leaves. I didn't like that. I didn't like when they were split up. I just didn't like when they were split up. I thought they worked so much better together, and that's what I wanted them to be together throughout this series and like be a team. And halfway through the second book, Elias leaves. Once we found out that Kenan was the Nightbringer, I wasn't surprised that he betrayed Leia, just because he seemed suspicious from the beginning. He was not nice to her, and he just seemed so suspicious. Like, he just did. I don't know. That whole part of the story that the Nightbringer manipulated Leia and like deceived her in that way just did not work for me. I disliked it so much. I just felt like it was so out of place. Like, I don't know. I do understand the point of Leia having to give her armlet to the Nightbringer as a form of love, and that makes sense, and I think I'd be all for it if the romance had made sense to me, if they had more chemistry, or if it was like a different type of love. Maybe like a friendship love, or like a sibling love, or the romance just, it didn't make sense to me. Okay, I also don't know how to pronounce this character's name. Helene? That's just what I'm gonna call her because that's what I would say in my head, but I feel like that's very wrong. Helene? That's pretty. Sure. Okay. So she was in love with Elias. I felt for her. I really felt for her unrequited love. It was so sad. I never thought that they were going to be together because Elias was attracted to her, but I don't think there was anything more to it than that for him ever. He was never really checking for her. And then she falls in love with Harper, who is Elias's brother. They care for each other. I just wish we kind of got more. I just felt like the romance was just not there for me. I felt nothing towards the romance, and usually I do enjoy the romance elements in series. It's very exciting to me. But in this series, like barely anything. And then in the end, like, there's hints at Helene and Musa probably getting together. That was weird. Just, it kind of was unnecessary. Let's talk about more about Helene, just like as a character individually. I love her. I love her. I disliked her in the, well, I didn't dislike her in the first book, but I was just kind of like, whatever towards her. But then she grew, and by the end of the series, she was my favorite character. She's amazing. So badass. Female characters, up there, dude, up there. Number one, maybe? I don't know. I thought she was fantastic. I thought her story arc was beautiful. Everything that she goes through throughout this series, insanely driven, so determined, and like she just got stuff done, man. It's so heartbreaking because every time she thought that like, this is it, this is what breaks me, boom, another thing would happen. I love that she's the Empress. Nobody else can be the Empress except for Helene because she fucking rocks, bro. Highlight of this series is her and her perspective, especially in the last book. Leia's character, I do really like her character, but for some reason I don't consider her a favorite. I don't know. I guess I just thought Helene's storyline was more interesting. I do really like fantasies that take place like in a castle, like royalty type stuff with the, you know, I like to follow the people who are in charge kind of. So that was what was going on with Helene's perspective, is that she, you know, working with the Emperor a lot because she's the Blood Strike, she's his second. And then in the last book, taking care of her sister and the little Emperor. It was a lot more interesting, like especially I think her younger sister's name is Livia. I loved her too. I loved her too. Oh, they were both, I just loved what was going on between Helene and Livia. I loved them together. Both of them such strong characters. I just thought that was a lot more interesting than what was going on with Leia. I also didn't really know what was going on with her for a little bit. She went a lot of different places. Her and Elias, I felt like, were just kind of all over the place. I really loved Leia in the first book. It was great how she has this progression of bravery. In the first book, she's very scared all the time and very hard on herself because she's not brave enough in her eyes and she doesn't do enough. She's not as brave as her mom or as her brother or her older sister. She feels really bad about that, and that is what is driving her forward, is the fact that she doesn't want to be a coward and that she wants to save her brother. I really loved that aspect of her storyline, and then by the end of it, she's like, I've done all these things, I'm amazing, like I'm tough, I may not have trained for like 14 years, but I can still kick ass, and I love that. I love that about her. I also just love the determination of freeing, protecting her people and humanity. After the big betrayal with the Nightbringer, it'd be so hard for so many people to move past that. She's just very resilient, so I love that about her character. And then Elias, loved him in the beginning. I really did. The third book, he's not his character. You've got like a book and a half of them trying to like, well, he is himself in the third book, but by the end of it he is not, and so throughout that entire book he's just not fully present in what's going on. But it definitely makes sense plot wise. It just wasn't my favorite character wise. Elias being in the waiting place definitely negatively impacted the romance elements between him and Leia. It just disrupted the flow for me, which makes me sad. And it disrupted the flow of his character. Still enjoyed his character by the end of the fourth book. The symbolism behind his character arc was also done very well. While he's in the waiting place, he kind of gets to learn more about his family. He meets his grandma, learns a little bit about his mom. It's very interesting. He learns a lot about his dad. Readers learn a lot about Elias's dad and how Harper is his brother, but they only get one conversation together and then Harper dies. So that was fucked up. Now I want to talk about the antagonist in this story. I really wish that we got more of the commandant. I do feel like we get good background on her and on the horrible things that happened to her that led her to be the way that she is. She was like a normal kid and then was taken by the scholar resistance, and her mom was tortured and killed, and then she was sent to go to school and her dad just wasn't there, so it's very traumatizing. And then the guy that she falls in love with gets murdered because he's a pleb. I didn't really see the progression of her character into like little girl to this horrendous monster. Literally horrendous monster. She definitely deserved to die. I don't think that her backstory redeems her at all. A lot of people go through bad shit, especially our main characters, and they didn't turn out like her. They could have, but they didn't. Then we have the Nightbringer himself, and I really liked his whole deal that he loved his people and he was doing this for the love of his people. I feel like that's a very interesting take on the villain because it humanized him. Then Leia felt bad for him when he would see his people dying. His grief is so strong that he wants to destroy the world. I just liked that the villains had more depth than just being evil and corrupt and wanting power. I don't think that that was ever the Nightbringer's goal of wanting power. I think he wanted his people free, but I also think he just wanted it to be over too. It was about vengeance, but it wasn't even about getting his people to be what they once were. It's just like about destruction because his grief is so strong that he literally cannot see anything else anymore. And he once was this being who was capable of love and was like low-key the embodiment of love itself. That love kind of just like turned rancid, turned him into this really hateful, scary thing. Okay, well that is all I have for my review and discussion. Again, really enjoyed this series. I thought it was a lot of fun. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of this series, if it's your favorite, if you disliked it. Talk to me in the comments. Like, subscribe, and I will have another video up for you soon. Bye-bye.